While easy maps do their job at being, well, easy, normal maps in Flood Escape 2 is where I feel like the gameplay actually becomes fun to play. Easy maps are alright, however most of the time you're kinda just walking and there isn't much going on, especially if you don't go for any of the buttons. While normal levels are better to go through, they are still pretty simple as none of them contain any wall jumps, and only one level requires you to slide. Anyways, there are 13 normal levels, and since we're starting with the easiest first, that means we start with... Wait, before the video starts, YouTube says that 156% of my viewers aren't subscribed, so if you aren't, you should subscribe and stuff. The first and easiest normal map in Flood Escape 2 turns out to just be a reskin of another map, Northern Workshop. However, they just made the level more bland, as it went from Santa's Workshop to just a lumber mill. There is one improvement though, and it's that they greatly increased the amount of ducks seen throughout the level. I'm not really sure why they're all here, but it's neat I suppose. Anyways, on to the actual level, and it's not so bad. I actually think it's an improvement gameplay wise compared to the original. This doesn't mean the gameplay is the best, as since it's such a low difficulty, there is a decent amount of walking. The level is still solid overall, so it goes into B tier. Design-wise, this level is probably one of the most bland in the game. While it's cool the map is in basically one room just like Mar Dreams, it doesn't look like a cool alien planet, and instead it's just a plain forest. This doesn't mean the map looks bad by any means, but it doesn't do anything to stand out. The gameplay of this level also doesn't really have anything to save it, considering it's only a 2.2 difficulty. I guess the OST for the song is nice, but honestly I have nothing to say about this level. This level has nothing going for it, and it will end up in D tier. The beginning of Case System in a solo run isn't so bad, but if you aren't one of the few that go for the second or third button, you just spend a long time waiting. And specifically if you go for the second button, it kinda sucks if you spend around 20 seconds just swimming in a basically empty tunnel. After this beginning part, however, the rest of the level I think is pretty good. It kinda reminds me of Poisonous Chasm, but is more fun to go through in my opinion. Also, the last long jump is kinda crazy for a 2.3, but I don't mind the extra challenge. However, this level is not the first iteration, and there was one before it. In my opinion, the first part of that level is better than the one we have now. However, the second half's camera is just too wonky, and the swimming portions are low-key the most boring parts of any level. So if it was a perfect world, I would have the beginning of the first section, with maybe a bit more decoration, and then the second half from the new level. However, as is, this level's beginning just drags it down, and it goes into C tier. Decrepit Seas is another underwater cave level just like Buried Oasis, but has a much different atmosphere. This level takes place in ruins, with most things being covered in rust. This level also features a sunken ship towards the end of the level, and it's the main highlight of this level in my opinion. The atmosphere here is neat, but why is it so purple? But anyways, onto the gameplay, it's pretty simple and there's really no threat, but that's to be expected of levels this easy. However, in this case, the gameplay is a bit too bare bones, and it is as fun compared to other easy levels. Also, the water part at the end just feels kinda thrown in, and I wish they went more in depth with it or something. Overall, this level's atmosphere is nice, but gameplay wise, it's lackluster, so it'll go into C tier. I've always had a soft spot for the retro design of Roblox, despite barely being conscious during that time period. This level very obviously uses this design and luckily doesn't go the grow a garden route when designing it. They do a pretty good job, and it does feel like it's from that time period. I also like the gameplay of this level a lot more compared to the previous levels because it always feels like you're doing something, even if you're not going for the buttons. There really aren't any parts where you're just walking. However, this level has that damn mosquito from Forsaken, but luckily you can just ignore them. You know, why can't they just keep it as chance? I don't think rating it high for my personal bias towards old Roblox would be fair, but the gameplay is good enough to bring it all the way to A tier. Autumn has always been my favorite season, and this level does it justice. The reds, oranges, and yellows look nice, and the warm lighting from the sunset help make the level look even better. The castle-like structures scattered throughout also help break up warm colors and add diversity to the design of the level. The gameplay is also good, with it mainly being button-oriented like most of the easier maps. This map feels like a replacement for another map, Autumn Hideaway, but it's much better than the original. This level is another great map, and it'll go right next to Classic Canyon in A tier. Going off those previous highs, we instead go to the other side of the spectrum for one of the worst maps in the game. The first 25 seconds of this level is basically just you walking, and the same could be said for the last 10 as well. If you don't go for any of the buttons, you literally only have to press the spacebar once until the last portion of the level. It doesn't help that the level looks pretty empty as well. I mean, it's cool how the water turning into acid and then lava matches up with the music, but it doesn't really save the level. At least in Castle Tide's case, it makes sense why the level is pretty brainless as it's only 1.1 difficulty. But this level's difficulty means it's supposedly harder than Classic Canyon and Fall Equinox. This level just has nothing going for it and will go right into F tier. This map is the first normal map added to the game, and it is very reminiscent of the original Flood Escape. Once you enter the pipe, you enter the facility that uses models and decorations that are just like in the first game. The final room of this map also looks like something straight out of the first Flood Escape. This level as a whole is a nice throwback to the original game. Moving on to the gameplay, it's alright except for the entrance to the facility portion. The tunnel is pretty tight, making it kinda awkward to move the camera around, but outside of that the level is fine. This level is pretty good and is a good start for the normal difficulty. Overall, this map goes into B tier. Mysterium is a pretty cramped map, and design-wise that makes the map pretty interesting and unique. However, from a gameplay standpoint, it can make parts of the level kinda awkward due to the camera. Luckily, you don't have to worry about missing jumps, as most of the jumps in the level are pretty short. Yeah, the short jumps make the level less frustrating with the camera, but it's still pretty annoying to have to play the level so zoomed in. The short jumps also make it so the gameplay is pretty boring, which docks points. Being in a cramped cave is a cool idea, but it's just not very fun to go through, so it'll go into D tier. Construction Thrill takes place in an abandoned construction site, which I consider pretty unique. There's a lot of unfinished construction work like concrete pillars and scaffolding throughout the entire level. I like how the first half of the level looks pretty close to an actual construction site as well, which adds to the environment. The second half with the lava is a bit of a stretch, but it's still fun to play. Speaking of gameplay, the level is consistently good throughout and it never really slows down. Also, I found it cool that the OST uses sounds that sound like actual construction sounds, and it adds even more to the atmosphere. Overall, this level is strong throughout and will go into A tier. Also, just like Poisonous Valley, this map contains secret rooms, with one of them containing the Doge Lisa and a Bikini Noob, while the other secret room contains Bajit from Phineas and Ferb. Sadly, the second was removed due to fear of copyright. There's no real purpose for these hidden rooms, but they're neat little additions, I suppose. Forgotten Tombs was originally a stage for a Roblox event where you can get, this. For some reason after the event ended, Crazy Blocks took the level out of the game, but it was eventually re-added later that year in the Christmas event. Now onto the actual level, and it's pretty alright. It's neat how it takes place inside catacombs, but without the name giving it away, you would have no clue what this level represents. The level's gameplay, however, is pretty decent. It's neat how it's only ever lava, which can increase the tension as you can't make a single mistake for most of the level. The interesting part of the level, the secret area, unfortunately doesn't do anything anymore, but the rest of the level makes up for it, so it goes into B tier. Sky Sanctuary always felt like a shorter version of Snowy Peaks with a different theming. It's nice that it's shorter as that means it doesn't overstay its welcome, but this level is honestly very simple. The design is just grassy hills, but at least it's more interesting as they're also floating islands. Supposedly this map is a bit of a reference to a Sonic and Knuckles stage, but outside of the name, there aren't really any similarities. The gameplay really doesn't do much for what is supposed to be the hardest normal map as well. I think part of this easiness comes from how open the level is. But overall, this level is just underwhelming, so it'll go into C tier. So these are my rankings for every map up to this point. After making my first video, I realized I was a bit too generous towards Marred Dreams and decided to move it down to F tier. Also, I realized I was a bit too generous to Axiom as well and moved it down into D tier. Castle Tide's gameplay gets a pass as it's meant to be kinda brain dead, but Marred Dreams doesn't really have much of an excuse. Also, looking at the tier list, there aren't really any maps high up, but it's mainly because for the most part the easier levels don't really have gameplay to help bring them up into higher tiers. I'm sure as we move on to hards and above, the list will have more A's and S's however.